All right, joining me live from Washington, D.C. is Colonel Rich Outzen. He is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation. Colonel Outzen, thank you so much for making time for us, as always. Now, the Supreme Leader, it had been a few days, his name had been propping up, and now it has been made formal. How does this look like for the U.S.? Because it's the fallen or the late Supreme Leader's son. He's going to be coming back with vengeance. Is a vengeful Ayatollah better for the U.S. now?
Well, it's good to be with you. And, you know, vengeance on the part of a son whose father has been killed in combat operations is a natural impulse, but it's not a strategy, right? So I would say that he may be and may feel as vengeful as he would like, but without the tools to implement that vengeance in an operational strategic matter, it really doesn't affect the war. I think what's more important from the perspective of the United States is that in this war, the Mojtaba's appointment sort of as the heir apparent just shows that this regime has no intent on making any concessions, either to the West or to its own people, who clearly are not happy living under the theocratic regime. There were some possible folks that could be appointed as supreme leader or into some important position associated with the Green movement, the Green Revolution movement back in the early aughts, for instance, that would have been an indicator that Tehran is willing to reach out to the West in a way that says we don't want nukes, we don't want perpetual conflict and confrontation. I think Mujtaba's ascension basically says more of the same, right? That we are following in the path of Ayatollah Khamenei and Khamenei, and we will fight the Western system and seek its overthrow. And the United States will take the appropriate lesson from that, which is, okay, you haven't had enough. And therefore, we will continue the war against your nuclear program, your ballistic missile program, and your proxy warfare throughout the region.
Colonel Outzen, do you find this to be spelling a more violent turn to the ongoing war, which is anyways blazing through West Asia at this point?
Well, again, just to go back to basic capabilities, I think that the ascension of a new leader indicates continuation of the war, at least as long as they maintain the ability to absorb punishment. But what it doesn't represent is the ability to escalate. And by escalate, I mean, look, if Iran had a better conventional military and had a deeper inventory of missiles than what it's actually got, they would still have some things that they could put into play that would represent escalation. If they had the relationship with Russia or with China that would make those countries willing to come into war on their behalf, that would represent a potential escalation. That's not what we have here. What we have here is the Iranian theocratic regime saying, we're not done yet, we can absorb more punishment. So I wouldn't frame it in terms of escalation, I would frame it in terms of sort of continuation. And yes, the Iranians have proven they can absorb a great deal of punishment. And their strategy, to the extent that they have an effective strategy, it's not escalation. It's dragging this out long enough that the price for the West, especially in terms of oil, gets to the point where the West does not want to continue it. We're not there yet, but I don't think they have any ability to escalate beyond the raising of oil prices.
Oil prices, you mentioned, it's crossed $110 a barrel. That's what we just learned, like just minutes earlier. How long before the US wants to figure out, okay, we'll need to do something else now, because if the prices of oil, they keep going up, is that what Iran's play is all about at this point? Because they've taken a great deal of punishment. Those visuals have gone around the world. Largely, their oil facilities, they're taking a bad amount of beating, but they're not letting go. What's the play?
Well, I think that's it. I think the Iranians, to their credit, are careful students of the U.S. political system. They know that President Trump has a midterm election. He won't personally be up for election in November, but his party, the Republican Party, will be, both in terms of Senate seats and House seats, House of Representative seats, will be facing a Democratic opposition that says this was a stupid war. Right, so that's really the side that the Iranians want to support in this. They want to drive up the price of oil, which of course drives up the price of gasoline, and in turn all sorts of consumer goods that could put a dent in Trump's economic performance. Now, the Biden administration's economic performance left plenty of room for attacks and criticism from the right. If the Iranians can put Trump in the position of saying, you haven't helped the consumers, prices are going up, this will feed the Democratic narrative and will become a very real political threat for Trump. I think that's the key to the Iranian strategy at this point, is keep American oil prices high, world energy prices high, and defeat the American diplomatic and political strategy.
Colonel Outzen, I'll revert to the topic of the Supreme Leader for Iran. It took them less than 2 weeks, I would say 8 days, to bring in a new Supreme Leader who's, again, they don't have a shortage of Ayatollahs. They have enough in the clerical regime to take over. What is the play for the US now? Do they want to continue eliminating leader after leader until they have their own person sitting on, or somebody they approve of?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the lifespan of Iranian leadership is dropping, right? So, and this is much more apparent even in the ranks of the IRGC as opposed to just the supreme leader. I think the U.S., I think the Trump administration is aiming for something like what it got with Venezuela, which is that you eliminate the top man who was virulently anti-American and virulently anti-Western, and move him out, and then try to encourage a second tier or third tier leader to make compromises with the U.S. I think that's the game here from Washington's perspective. I don't think Mojtaba's the guy, so I think that the prospects that there will be another hunt for Iranian leadership with Mojtaba being the target, I think the chances of that are very high. Ultimately, I think what Washington wants to see, as I mentioned, is the establishment of a regime, or at least a leader, who's much more representative of where Iran was in, say, 2005, 6, 7, when they were negotiating on the nuclear file, and when they basically said, we want to be an honest member of the international system. That all changed after 2008, 2009. We saw a very hard turn after the Green Revolution, the Green movement uprising in Iran. But somebody from that Green movement, if they're willing to say, look, we want to get along with the West, and we don't want to be dismembered as a country, we don't want to be in perpetual conflict. That's, I think, the trigger that the U.S. is looking for, that the Trump administration is looking for, somebody more moderate put into a senior leadership position. So we haven't seen that yet, and therefore I think Mojtaba is likely going to be a target.
Colonel Outzen, do you see this happening in Trump's term? Because under his term in 2018, U.S. walked out of the JCPOA. In last year, in June, the 5th round of negotiations had happened, the 6th was scheduled, and then the 12-day war was started with preemptive strikes. This year again, 3 rounds were completed, 4th was scheduled, it was going fine, at least that's what the Omani foreign minister said, and then again preemptive strikes. Is there a lack of will from the US? Do you see it that way?
Well, I don't. I mean, having listened to the U.S. Negotiators, including Jared Kushner and Stephen Witkoff, they've basically said that Iran is doing the same thing in this round of negotiations that it's done in every previous round of negotiations, which is to imply pragmatism and imply willingness to talk, but in the end not being willing to actually make the hard concessions necessary for peace. Let me be very clear. From the United States perspective, in Iran that calls for the destruction of the United States and of Israel, a key regional allies, that pursues nuclear weapons, and there is unambiguous information about the level of fissile material and the level of enrichment they're seeking. That's not peaceful nuclear, that's weapons grade, right? So they're doing that, they're developing the ballistic missiles, and they're funding proxies that are going after basically every neighbor in the region. That cannot continue. And President Trump is not a president who will allow it to continue. So anybody who says the negotiations were going fine, with all due respect to the Omanis, they were going fine because the two sides were talking. That's true. But it is the Iranian strategy to talk while they're building on their nuclear program. This is a president who won't accept that. So I agree with the description that the talks were going, and this was a U.S. decision that the talks were not going far enough. But where I would challenge the premise is that were those talks actually producing a sustainable and sort of reasonable compromise? The answer is no, because that's not what the Mullah regime wanted.
Also, Colonel Outzen, we did talk about the damage that Iran has taken. we recently learned that an 8th soldier from the US side, that's a confirmed a death from the US soldiers. I wanted to understand, there's also been an attack, or a blast, I would say at this point, near the US Embassy in Oslo, which is being probed for a terrorist link. Are US citizens now under attack in a lot of other places across West Asia and also part of Europe, or in the foreseeable future?
Well, they're at risk for sure, and there's been protests in favor.
All right, I think, Colonel Outzen, we lost you. We lost you for a bit. That was Colonel Rich Outzen. Always a pleasure speaking with him. There will be more to discuss. We'll continue the discussion at this point with him as we rejoin with him a little later.